Man, it's great to be here today, and we are going to be kind of traveling back in time about 20 years. For some of you, that's easier than others, and we're going to be revisiting this movie that I loved. I thought it was such a good movie, and it is called The Truman Show, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, but first we're going to watch this little trailer.
Comments are still headed.
What else is on?
Yeah, let's see what else is.
Coming to you now from the largest studio ever constructed, it's The Truman Show!
Yeah!
Good morning!
Good morning.
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
What if? No scripts, no cue cards.
Morning, Spencer. How's it going?
What if you were watched every moment of your life?
How many cameras you got there in that town?
5,000.
I believe Truman is the first child to have been legally adopted by a corporation.
That's correct.
Brilliant.
This story is all about Truman Burbank, a plain, average insurance salesman, but what is not so average is that his entire life, from the moment he was born, has been filmed. He was adopted by a corporation, and his whole life is a TV show that everyone's watching, and everyone is in on it except for him. And he's living his life, and he feels pretty good. He feels like he's got it all together. He feels like life is good, got it figured out. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about him, but also with someone you're probably more familiar with hearing about on this stage. And that's another person who was adopted, a Jewish man named Moses. And he was adopted by the Egyptian royal family. So his biological mother, was asked to be his nursemaid and kind of got him started in those early years of his life. And so I'm sure she was telling him about his heritage and who God was. But eventually he was transitioned over to his Egyptian caretakers, where he learned all about Egyptian supremacy and was taught by some of the best Egyptian teachers in the entire world. And he grew up in the royal family with wealth and power and authority. And I think he probably looked at his life, he's like, man, I got it all figured out. I got this all together, man. My life is just upward trajectory. And maybe there's been times when you've kind of thought, hey, I've got it all figured out. I got this. And I don't know about you, but with me, those feelings are usually fleeting and very temporary. And I realize, man, I don't have it all figured out. And Moses, soon as he grows up, learns that he also doesn't have it all figured out, because he notices something. And so it tells us, many years later, when Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his own people, the Hebrews, and he saw how they were forced to work. So he realized that this one group of people that he closely identified with was being enslaved and persecuted by another group of people with whom he closely identified with. And we don't know what kind of reality distortion field he was operating under. He didn't notice what was going on before this point, but he didn't. And so now there is this internal conflict of what's going on and which of these identities is going to win. And there's all this friction. And it finally culminates in this watershed moment when this happens. It says, during his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. So he sees this Egyptian beating one of the Israelites, one of the Jews, and he knows it's not right. He knows there's a problem, and he feels this anger well up inside of him, but he's just thinking, he knows he needs to act though. And then here's what he does. It says, after looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand. So we see there's some deliberation here, right? It's not like he saw this happening and he was like just jumping into action. I will rescue you. No, he's like, is anyone coming? Any cameras on? Any drones? No. Okay, now I'm going to get in. So he wasn't fully committed yet, but finally he jumps in and does something. And after this one sentence, the Bible moves on, which I'm kind of frustrated about because I have so many questions. Like, did the Hebrew get away? How big was this Egyptian? Because when we think about Moses, right, we have a certain image in our head. We think of this old, angry man who's constantly walking around with two big stone tablets. But man, after this fight, like maybe we should have an image more like this. Was Moses like the first UFC fighter? Like what? Like, I don't know. The Bible skips the fight scene, and it's a little disappointing, but, more to come. I digress. But we have Moses, he kills the Egyptian, and he's ready to move on, and he goes on with his life. He feels pretty good about what he did. But then he comes upon two Hebrews fighting, two Jews fighting. I don't know why he's always walking in on fights, but he walks in on two Jews fighting this time. And he goes up to him. He breaks with the fight. And he's like, guys, what's going on? And the one who provoked the fight, he says, who appointed you to be our prince and our judge? Who do you think you are? Now, here's the irony here. That Moses basically was a prince, and he could probably do whatever he wanted with this guy. So it was kind of a weird question, but the man's next question chills Moses to the bone. Because here's what he says, are you going to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Moses' secret is out. And he knows it is only a matter of time before Pharaoh, the king, finds out what's going to happen, and he's going to want revenge. And sure enough, Pharaoh finds out, the king finds out, and so Moses has to run away. He has to leave everything. Whatever image of him, his future in his head of being this ruler, of holding all this power and this wealth is now gone. But it's not just that. He had to leave his family. He had to leave his friends. He had to leave everything he knew. And maybe you've been in a similar position where you did what you felt was right, and then you lost because of it. You did the thing that you thought was the moral thing to do, and you got punished for it. And so here we have Moses just in this new place without anything or anyone. And just like Moses, eventually Truman's life begins to unravel as he starts to see more consistencies, as he starts to see more things that just don't make sense. And I wonder about that. Like, can you imagine your life if you found out that everyone around you was an actor? Like your parents weren't really your parents, and maybe that would make things make more sense, actually, when you think about, like, oh, that's why. Your parents are not really your parents. Your friends are not really your friends. You find out that beer-chugging degenerate of a college roommate that you had was actually an Emmy-winning, Juilliard-trained Shakespearean actor. I mean, that would just be so wild to discover that life was nothing like you thought it was going to be. And so, as Truman's life is kind of having that occur, before that, the director realized that he needed to do some things in order to keep Truman the way that he wanted him to be. He knew that in order to create an interesting television show that everyone was going to want to watch, he was going to have to manufacture situations to make it interesting. But one of the first obstacles he faced when Truman was very young was that Truman had the spirit of exploration. He was always running off to the very far edge, wanting to see what was over that next rise. And of course, the director realized, man, I can't build a set the size of the world. That's not going to work. I got to come up with a way to hem him in so that there's not going to be a problem with him running off. And so the set was built on an island. And so they had Truman go boating at about 8 years old with his father. And while they're out on the water, they've got all these lights and weather special effects and all this kind of stuff. And so they create a storm on the water with Truman and his dad. And the dad falls off and in Truman's mind, drowns. And so Truman believes that his father has died. And as a result of that, he has this crippling fear of the water. And so the last thing he wants to do is go anywhere else. And, I feel like the world does that to us too, doesn't it? We have this sense of exploration and wanting to be better than we are and wanting to grow and experience new things. And then the world just kind of just slaps it down and pushes it down. And I think this happens a lot earlier than we realize. I remember when I was younger, there were 3 ways in order to get recognition, in order to be popular, in order to stand out, and that was you could be good at academics, you could be good at athletics, or you could be good with the ladies. And me, well, I was good at none of those things, just none of them, bad at all the things, just awful. And so growing up was kind of hard for me because, man, there's no way of succeeding. There's no way of standing out. I don't have any of the qualities that the world has told me I need. And so that's one of the reasons why I love working with kids and with students, because I want them to know that there's so much more to this world. There is so much more. There's so much that God has given them. And there's so much more to this world than just your ability to memorize facts or throw a ball. There's so much more that God has created for us. And so I love that. And the actor who played Truman, his name is Jim Carrey, he had a realization himself about what really matters. And Jim Carrey, there's something to say about him, because the average comedy makes about $40 million, but a Jim Carrey comedy makes about $150 million. So that is a big difference. So Jim had it all. He was famous, he was funny, he had wealth, he had it all. But there was this moment in his life when he had this realization. He said, as an actor, you play characters, and if you go deep enough into these characters, you realize your own character is pretty thin to begin. You suddenly have this separation. Who's Jim Carrey? Oh, he doesn't exist. He doesn't exist. So Jim, he checked all the boxes. Everything that the world tells us is important, he did it. He had it. But yet he realized it was not enough. And so what do we do with this? How do we move on? How do we move forward? And I think the first thing we have to do is we have to identify the obstacles. What is it that hampered us? What is it that just put, what was that left-hand turn that just really threw everything in? And I think that we could get our first clue into this by your Juilliard-trained college roommate who might have said, his greatness weighed, his will is not his own, for he himself is subject to his birth. And so that comes from Hamlet. And what it is saying is that because of the family he was born into, there are certain rules that he has to follow. And maybe because of the family you were born in, there are some hang-ups, some obstacles, some problems, some issues that you either adopted as a result of being part of the family or were genetically inherited by you. And they're just something that, since as long as you can remember, has been weighing on you, has been holding you back. And maybe it doesn't have anything to do with your family, but maybe it was an event that happened in your life, an event that you decided that, man, okay, I tried to succeed and I failed. I tried to be vulnerable and I got burned. I jumped and leapt towards the stars and I fell short. And so you decided just then, no more. The walls are coming up. The barriers are coming in. I'm not going to show any more vulnerability. I'm not going to try anymore because I know how that wins. I'm not going to do that anymore. And so you just close yourself off. And you build your own island of which you are not willing to cross. That's what happened to Moses, right? This event happened to him. And so Moses had resigned himself to just living this lesser life. You know, he became a shepherd and got married, had a kid, all things that are fine, but we can kind of see the state of his mind by what he named his kid. He named his kid Gershon, which means I am a stranger in a foreign land. Aren't you glad your parents didn't just name you after whatever awful thing was happening in their life? You know what I mean? Some of us would be named like high cholesterol, or not my president, or Just- yeah. Or bathroom scale done broke again. We'd all have some like crazy weird names, and so it's good. It's good that is not how it goes. But that's just his state of mind. And so he's kind of resigned himself to this life of mediocrity, and he is now a shepherd. He's gone from servants waiting on him to him waiting on sheep. Very different dynamic. And so here he is, and he's just living this life when he's called. And he hears his voice coming from a burning bush. And so the bush is there, it's burning, but yet it's not being charred. The leaves are not burning off. It's just on fire. And it says Moses. And then it says, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And all this means is kind of like the founding fathers of the Israel religion. So it might be like, I am the God of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Ben Franklin, if we were to Americanize this. So you say, this is just who I am. And so he's got Moses' attention. Moses is obviously a little scared because, God's talking to him. And then this is what God says. He says, the Lord said, I have seen the troubles my people have suffered in Egypt, and I have heard their cries when the Egyptian slave masters hurt them. I am concerned about their pain, and I have come down to save them from the Egyptians. I will bring them out of that land and lead them to a good land with lots of room, a fertile land. And I bet Moses is nodding. He's like, yeah, God, you save your people. You got this. This is wonderful. I am so happy for you. And then God says this. So now I am sending you to the king of Egypt. Go, bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. I think Moses stopped nodding at this point. I think the enthusiasm probably dipped a little bit at this point. Because Moses is like, oh, wait a minute. I've already seen this movie. I've already tried to help the Israelites, and I lost everything. And now you want me to go back? This is 40 years later, and the trauma of that experience had remained with Moses. And he's like, God, you have the wrong guy. I can't do it. And so this is how God responds. I will be with you. I will be with you. After you lead the people out of Egypt, all of you will worship me on this mountain. And I love this response because God's just like, no. It's cool. It's cool, Moses, because I'm going to be with you. And then we're going to go party on the mountain. It's going to be great. But you are probably like Moses. I am just like Moses. And keep this one on here. We are living right here in the ellipsis. Because we're like, whoa, you go from I'll be with you to the party. Like, but God, how am I going to go to the Israelites and convince them I should be their leader? And how am I going to go to Pharaoh and convince him to let the people go? And what am I going to wear? And, all these questions. We have all these questions with God, but. And so God tells him, shows him some of his power, and Moses just pushes back with his limitations, pushes back with his inabilities. And this just keeps going and going. God just trying to say, no, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And finally, Moses ends with this. He says, please, Lord, send someone else. Please, God, just send someone else. I can't do it. And maybe you've had these conversations with God. God, I know you're asking me to do this, but I can't. I've tried and my heart was broken. I wanted to do it and I failed. God, I know what you're asking, but please just send someone else. And we've all had these feelings. We've all been there when we were just broken and we just believe we cannot move forward. But, man, we can't stop there. I mean, sure, we have to identify the problem, and we have to then we have to discover the truth. And here's the great thing, is that when God's having this conversation with Moses, he doesn't argue with Moses about his inabilities. He doesn't argue with Moses about his limitations, because God had already answered all these questions when he said, I will be with you. I will be with you. And that's all Moses needs, is to realize that I will be with you. That's how we discover the truth, is realizing this. And so just some practical ways of thinking about this, of discovering the truth. The first one is, what thoughts and emotions come to mind? What negative thoughts and emotions come to mind? Maybe it's like, I'm worthless. I'm unlovable. I'll never be enough. What are these mental images or words that is just holding you back, that is just debilitating to you? And so once you have that, then you say, we have to look at how do they measure up about what God says about you? Because God says you are loved. God says that you are a masterpiece. God says he can do great things with you. So when we take all these negative things in our head, all these things that really are just messages from Satan, and then we compare them to what God says about us, all right, then we can go to the third one. How would it change things if you really believed that God was with you? So maybe you would say, I'm going to be more confident because I know God is with me. I'm going to know that I have value because God is with me. I'm going to be able to act in a better way because I know God is with me. And so finally, what behaviors or thought patterns would need to change to live like you believed God was with you? And so maybe that means I'm going to love people the way that God loves me. Or maybe I'm going to take on something that seems almost impossible because I know that God is with me. Because we can't just stop at the thoughts. We have to turn that into action. In Truman, some of the, within the movie itself, some of the press comes to the director of the show. And they say, hey, isn't it kind of wrong that you're keeping Truman in the dark and you're not telling him what the truth is? And here's what the director says. He says, we accept the reality of the world as it is presented. If he was absolutely determined to find the truth, there is no way we could prevent him. Guys, fight to find the truth. Like, do whatever it takes. Just fight as hard as you can to find the truth of what God means and what God is going to do in your life. Fight for that. And so so after we've identified the obstacles, we've discovered the truth. Lastly, we need to explore again. We need to explore again. The director, he sees that Truman is just everything that he had planned is just kind of falling apart, and Truman realizes what's going on, and so Truman decides he's going to leave. And so he jumps on a boat because it's the only way off the island. He faces his fear and he heads out. And so the director's like, I can't let this stand. I can't let him go. I can't let him discover the truth. And so he brings, he starts the storm simulator up, and he starts it out just kind of, little choppy waves, just a little bit of wind. And he's like, okay, Truman's going to turn back, but Truman persists and he keeps going. And so the director, turns it up a little bit. The waves get rougher. The wind gets stronger. The rain starts pouring down. He's drenched. And the director's like, he's going to turn around. Truman, he's got to turn around. But Truman keeps going. And so then the director, just pulls out all the stops. There's lightning coming everywhere. The rain is just massive and pouring. And Truman takes a rope and he lashes himself to the ship, unwilling to leave. And so if the boat goes down, he's going with it. But he is not turning back. And so the director finally gives up. He turns off all the waves, all the seas. And so it's just him. And he's got this microphone, and he speaks to Truman. And Truman's standing there, and he tells Truman, like, look, there's a door, you can go, but this world I created for you, man, this world revolves around you. You're the star. This is the world that you want to be a part of. Stay here. And Truman thinks about it, but what he realizes is that this world's not real. And so he walks off. And guys, I'll tell you something about the Christian life. It is not easy. It is difficult. It is hard, but it is so real. And it is worth it. So explore again. When we look at Truman at first, he was a man who wanted to explore, and that was taken away from him by this crippling fear propped up by a fabricated world. And then we've got Moses who had resigned himself to just living this lesser life. And then God invited him to explore again. God invited him on an adventure. And God invites you on an adventure too. He wants you to discover new places, to do new things, to be more than you've ever thought you could be. And there was this one explorer, his name is David Livingston, and I love this quote by him. Because he says, God, send me anywhere, only go with me. Lay any burden on me, only sustain me. And sever any tie in my heart except the tie that binds my heart to yours. And I love that. And so just go out. And one of the things that is so great is that Moses decided to take God up on the offer. And so he led his people. He took them out of Egypt. He accomplished all these things. He led them for decades. And then finally, he gathers the people because his time of leadership is about to be done. And all the people gather and they just really want to see. What is he going to say to his replacement? Because he's going to speak to all the people. He's going to speak to his replacement. And everyone's just gather around like, man, Moses has got all this wisdom now. He's led us through war. He's led us through without food. He's led us through all this kind of stuff. Man, what wisdom? What is he going to say? And they're all just listening in to what he's going to say. And this is what Moses says to his successor and what he says to us. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord will personally go ahead of you. He will be with you. He will never fail. He will neither fail you nor abandon you. And so I want to leave you with this. Explore again. Explore God's promises. Explore God's faithfulness. Explore without fear or without a discouragement, because God is with you.